Hey guys, Jesse here, and yeah, it's been a while. Hope you guys are doing okay. For me, I've been doing pretty good, and yeah, just been enjoying the new year, which means it's time for me to try to get back into making YouTube once again. I have been doing stuff. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I've gotten more into Warhammer. As you can see, I got Nurglings on my desk, so I am working on stuff, promise. And also, I've been posting a lot of classic video games on my story, um, just of games that I either missed out as a kid or I just got interested in and wanted to play again. So, yeah, my plans for this year is to try to make more videos about painting and video games, which is the subject of today's video, and perhaps more Gunpla. I still have a whole mountain of kits to build, but I've just needed to motivate myself to get into it. So hopefully YouTube will be that once again. But anyways, we're not talking about Gunpla. We're not talking about Warhammer. We're not talking about paint. We're talking about video games, specifically handheld video games. So recently, I bought a Mr. FPGA emulation station console. Not sure what to really call it, but basically, if you don't know what a Mr. FPGA is, it's just basically a emulation platform that can emulate everything from the Atari 2600 all the way up to about PlayStation 1 and 64, etc. Which means handheld gaming is in that spectrum there, which includes Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, etc. However, for me, I have never enjoyed playing any handheld games on the big screen. I just find that they were always designed for screens that small and not that big. So, yeah, it wasn't really doing it for me. Even with the perfect emulation and scaling and etc., etc., I just can't really get into it. Even as a kid, when I begged my mom for the Game Boy Advance player for the GameCube, I just really didn't like it in the end. Sorry, Mom. Hope you're not watching. But, anyways, that led me to look for another solution. So I had to turn back to software emulation, and it's been a while since I've tried emulation on a handheld. The last thing I did try was the Steam Deck, which was pretty good, but personally, I don't really consider the Steam Deck that portable. It's still kind of this huge, bulking mass, and I wanted a different form factor. My favorite being the Game Boy Advance SP, which the people at Anbernic so kindly replicated in the RG35XXSP, which is a horrible name, but it does have the letters SP in there, so they were kind of on the mark. But anyways, yeah, look at this. It's basically a Game Boy Advance SP in translucent green, which is a color I really didn't want, but they didn't really have any other colors I wanted. Basically, the colors they have for this are silver and gray, which annoyingly are the only two solid colors. I get they have to do silver. That was a launch color for the SP. And then the gray is kind of like a nostalgic Game Boy thing. But there was also blue and red. Why isn't there a solid blue and red? Anyways, the rest are all translucent. And I think there's like green, blue, red, white, and black. White and black also annoyingly being transparent. I don't know. I know people like this and they think it's cool and stuff, but personally, I just wish I had a solid green one. Anyways, I'm gonna stop whining about the color and talk about the actual unit. So yes, it's an SP. Look at it. There were many options out there and probably even better options for what I wanted to do, but I really wanted this form factor. I really, really wanted this form factor. I mean, this is probably the most popular Game Boy Advance that people like out there for people. There's the original, this, and then the micro. But I think just overall, this was the most popular portable game console design I think ever made, just because it was just so convenient. And it protected the screen, of course, and you will really want to protect this screen because it is absolutely gorgeous. But let's take a look around it real quick. It's got two micro SD card slots on the front, which is nice, meaning you could put your OS on one and then your ROMs on the other one. Headphone jack. It's just weird to see a headphone jack on a 2025 electronic product. So yeah, I really appreciate that because I don't think this has any Bluetooth connectivity. It might. I'm not actually sure. Reset button, power button. The original SP had a switch which I wish they could have done on here, but there are some sleep functions and such that require holding the power button and pressing it, etc. So I understand why it has to be a power button. You have 4 shoulder buttons as opposed to the 2 that the original had. Of course, they're trying to advertise this as being able to play everything up to Dreamcast, which I would highly suggest you don't do, but we'll talk about that when we turn it on. Anyways, you've got 4 shoulder buttons. They're clicky. They feel quite nice, as you can see under there, actually, through the plastic. They use micro switches. They don't feel anything like the Game Boy Advance SP's weird, kind of floaty, and frankly kind of crappy, tiny shoulder buttons, but I actually think they feel a little bit better, personally. Go ahead, shoot me. You have micro or mini HDMI, which is really annoying, but honestly, I don't think it's realistic to hook this up to a TV or monitor. USB-C charging, which is real nice. The battery here is conveniently behind a door that's really easy to get past, just the screw. The battery life on this is roughly 5 to 6 hours if you use it for what it's meant for, which is clearly portable gaming. Now, of course, if you run Dreamcast and N64, stuff like that, it's going to go a lot quicker. But again, for what it's meant for, pretty damn good battery life. Volume, rocker, and that's about it in terms of I/O. Let's open it up for the controls. The screen, talk about that when we turn it on a lot more, but it is 3.5 inches, which is really, really nice. I don't know the resolution, but I do know one thing about it, and it has to do with Game Boy Advance games. Talk about that. Anyways, I'm going to talk about a lot of things later. Anyways, the controls, the most important part. Very good controls, very, very good controls, very high quality. They're not the same as the Game Boy Advance SP's controls. They just aren't. The SP's controls were, frankly, pretty shallow and not the best, but they worked well enough for the form factor. But with this, the presses are a lot more definite and there is a bit more travel on the buttons. So I actually prefer that. There's also 2 extra buttons, which are by default mapped to Turbo A and Turbo B. But of course, if you're playing something like PS1 or Genesis or something where you need 3 buttons, then of course it comes in handy. This used to be a brightness button on the original SP, which I don't have. I can't find my original SP, which is really annoying. I know I have one. It's somewhere. I think a SP gremlin stole it or something and threw it in the backyard, but I can't find it, which is annoying. Because I would compare it to this size-wise. This is actually slightly bigger in every dimension than the SP, so a little fatter, a little wider, a little taller. Wish I was a baller, but yeah, it's just ever so slightly bigger. So if your hands are like formed to the shape of an SP for playing it, because you've been playing it for years and years and years, like mine, you will immediately feel that this is just a little chunky, just a little chunkier, but it's not anything crazy. Of course, the ergonomics of it do not exist, just like the original SP. It's just a big square, but the plastic itself is very nice. It's very high quality and it's got a matte finish, so it's nice to hold on to. Now, as you can hear from the buttons, the start and select specifically, very, very clicky. They're using dome switches, but compare that to the face buttons. There was a problem with the first run of these where these dome switches were being used for all the buttons, so these were incredibly loud. But now, seems to have been fixed and they are of an acceptable volume, I would say, although these are still very loud. But nothing on this feels cheap whatsoever, so good on Anbernic for that. Of course, you got some rubber feet or rubber nubbins in here to protect the screen. Again, the screen, we'll turn it on. You'll see just how gorgeous it is. You can see me. Hello. But yeah. What else to mention with this compared to the original SP? Right, the hinge. So the hinge quality is very nice. It's a little stiff, but then again, I'm thinking about an SP. I'm comparing it to an SP that has been used for over 20 years or so, or whatever, whenever the original SP came out. But this is very nice. It also snaps at the same angle as the original SP. However, while it can go back, Oh, now make me a liar, won't you? I was going to say it doesn't stay there, but it does stay there now. It used to just spring right back. Huh. Well, alright, that's broken in. I lied. Let's just turn it on. Stop making a fool of myself. It does have the same two LED lights here, and they work the same as the original. The top showing the power and will blink red and green as it's low on battery, and the bottom one is your charging one that glows amber. So, yep, just the same. I'm going to adjust the exposure here so we can actually see the screen. Oh. My camera decided it wanted to move. There we go. So this is the front end of the Anbernic SP. I'm not going to say the whole name. As you can hear, annoying menu click. You can turn that off, but I've left it on for a reason. That reason being so you could hear it. That's also the volume adjusting noise. Pretty bad as well. The speaker on this is very good. It's mono, but it's very clear and high quality. However, it gets a little too loud. You'll be blowing out everything if you turn it up to max, so don't do that. Anyways, let's go one by one real quick. We got game rooms. This is basically the emulators that Anbernic thinks you should be using with this unit. We have RA game, which is RetroArch game. That's literally all your other emulators. This unit does come with preloaded games. We'll talk about that. But basically, this is just a Linux-based system with RetroArch loaded onto it with their own custom UI. App Center, what's in here? Music, video, ebook. Why would you ever want to read a book or an ebook or any document, really, on a screen this small? File manager, of course, that's normal. Apps and expert, what's that? Oh, it's a keyboard. It's probably just like the terminal or something. Let's talk about the screen real quick. As you can see, the viewing angles on this thing are absolutely insane. I bet you could look at the screen from behind and still see it. It's a fantastic screen, and everything looks amazing on it, frankly. Favorites are just your favorite games. History are games you've played before. Yes, I have been playing this. I have been testing it. Search, you can search for your games, etc. Settings or settings. The only thing unique in here about settings are your standby mode settings. So this does have a mode in which you can close it. It goes into a sort of sleep mode, and then you can open it and hit the power button and turn it back on. And you can do this in games as well. And you can set it to stand by for a few seconds or minutes, then immediately turn off. You can have it instantly shut down as soon as you close the hinge or the screen. Or you could just have it stay on standby the entire time it's closed, which is what I have it set to. It's a very nice feature that the SP didn't have. Some people believe the SP did have this, but it didn't. It was just the clamshell was just meant to protect the screen. But yeah, anyways, button sound. That's what this water drop sound is. I'm not turning that off just because I want this to be a sort of out-of-the-box experience, which I'm treating this first part as, spoilers, this is not the OS front end I use for this thing. Hell no. Because I do find this thing very annoying, ugly, and just kind of poor. Anyways, let's go into game rooms and look at the systems that they think you should be playing on this. PSP game. I'm going to disagree with that immediately because the PSP had an analog nub and there is no analog nub here. So yes, any analog game on PSP that required the analog nub just isn't ideal on this. Yes, you can remap the analog nub to the D-pad, I understand, but you wouldn't want to. Just don't do it. PSP performance on this, you know what? I'll be honest, I haven't actually checked. We're going to look real quick. This thing claims it can play up to Dreamcast, like I said. There is a big fat asterisk on that. The asterisk being it can't. It can, technically, it'll boot. It'll go into those games, but you wouldn't want to play any of them. Alright, come on. God of War. Oh, Jesus Christ. Shut up. Okay. Load game. This is obviously not the right resolution and size and everything for PSP, as we know the PSP is like this widescreen weird thing. Oh my god, I forgot there is an opening to this. It probably runs PSP fine. I'll be honest, I'm not going to go through that. Maybe I will, because it won't let me out of here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we're looking at like the raw emulator, which is PPSSPP, which is a very good emulator. But again, no analog nub. You don't want to do it. There's games like for example, I think SOCOM use the analog nub and the D-pad, D-pad being for like commands and stuff, and so you just can't do it. You can't play it. Just don't do it. PS1, yes, it runs PS1. PS1 runs just fine on this, honestly. I tested a few games. It runs okay, and sure, if you want to play it, playing a game that isn't a DualShock game, it probably runs all right. Although, I find PS1 games to be far more enjoyable actually on a TV with the size of screen it was meant for. You have the 3 arcade systems here, or you have vertical arcade. I guess that's just games that are vertical, obviously. And then you have the 3 Capcom systems. They all work fine. Those are all good. Then you have your handhelds, basically, and then like Mega Drive and some 16-bit stuff. Also, although annoyingly, Sega Master System has a Saturn controller, has its little icon, so that's good. My opinion, by the way, for playing any of the Sega consoles that have the 6-button controller is to just not do it on anything other than a 6-button controller. Because believe it or not, those games were designed with 6 buttons in mind. I know you can remap this to be like A, B, C, X, Y, Z, or whatever, but it's just not ideal, man. It's just not good. You know, like I said, they were designed with that controller in mind. So my opinion is just stay away from this unless you really, really want to play it on here. Plus, again, these were home consoles, so playing these on a big screen, I think, is far more enjoyable personally. I'm not going to go through the handheld games quite yet, but I want to show you that in the other OS. But let's look at this. This is where I'm like, why? Frankly, why even bother putting stuff on this that it's just not meant for? So Nintendo DS, how are you going to play the DS on a device with no touchscreen? I don't understand. It probably runs fine, but I don't get it. I don't get it. There's just better ways. N64, we're going to look at this. Again, no analog stick. What are you going to do? You can remap it, sure, but would you want to? Maybe. But as I'm about to demonstrate, it can't do N64. So here's Killer Instinct. This is a notoriously pretty difficult game to emulate. Kinda. There are definitely emulators that can do it. Clearly already having some issues. Hear that? I think he said Killer Instinct, but it was more like yes, Jago. Oh, it's like a thunderstorm back there. Yeah, this ain't working too well, obviously. So, yeah, N64 emulation, there may be some games you can play, but honestly, just don't do it. I know you... Oh my god, how do I get out of here? I know you can tweak the settings here in RetroArch, change core options, etc., but I do find that once you start to get too deep into that, it kind of kills your mood to actually play the game. And what's the point of playing the game if it's not, it's frankly perfectly emulated? I don't know. I guess this is why I love my Mr. FPGA so much, because it's just perfect emulation pretty much every single time. Pretty much. But yeah, I don't get it. But again, there's no analog stick. What's the point? That's just my opinion. Anyways, let's get Dreamcast for now and actually go to Saturn. Yeah, why would you want to play the Saturn? The Saturn is very hard to emulate, but they kind of trick you here, because I added Panzer Dragoon and Sega Rally Championship. They come packed with these 5 games: Clockwork Knight, 2, and then these 3 shoot 'em ups. But those are all like 2D games. I know Clockwork Knight has some 3D stuff, but they're very, very easy to emulate. But stuff like Panzer Dragoon, not so much. And this was a launch game, by the way, in the US at least, for the Sega Saturn. So this, to me, this is like the baseline. If you can't get Panzer Dragoon working on your Saturn emulator or your device or whatever, it's not worth it, frankly. Not sure if you can hear that, but that's not right. So whatever. It looks really clear, by the way. Again, this screen is gorgeous. Even if it doesn't run everything well, it's a good looking screen. Check that out. That is not running correctly. It looks a lot more blue, by the way, on my camera than it does in real life. But yeah, Panzer Dragoon, not the best running game ever. I think it runs at like 20 FPS or something in real life, but this feels awful, and it looks awful. Let's see if I can lower the exposure a little bit. It's a little better. Yeah, I mean, it looks good. It looks good. The resolution's kind of, fitted to the screen, etc. But yeah, it's just not running well. It's not running well at all. Let's get out of there. This is a very bright screen too. Of course, you can turn that down, which I'm not sure how to do it in this OS, but yeah. I'm not going to show you Sega Rally Championship, but it had some polygon glitching, so that wasn't good either. So basically what I'm trying to say is use this for maybe like PS1 and under. I don't even think I would suggest PS1 just because it had games with the dual analog sticks, so just avoid that. Anything like 16-bit and under is great. Although I like to just keep to the handhelds. This is what I bought it for. I just bought it for handheld gaming. So I only have handheld systems on my other SD card, which we're about to switch to. But there is one last thing I want to show you. Dreamcast, by the way, I won't show you Dreamcast. It takes a little too long to load into and get into. But it runs decently fine. But again, big ass analog stick and analog triggers for that matter on the Dreamcast. So not something you want to do. There is something. What was it under? This menu. Ports. All right, so again, this is a Linux-based system. These are basically PC ports that they put on here. Some of these are, actually all of these are free. Like freely distributed games that you don't have to pay for. Because I believe this is like the original build of Cave Story, etc. I think they have like Rick Dangerous, Wolfenstein 3D, Super Noah's Ark 3D, okay. Yeah, Rick Dangerous. So these are all free, right? The first versions of these, believe it or not, came with stuff as recent as Balatro and Sonic Mania. You can't do that, Anbernic. You can't have games that are still on the market just thrown onto this thing that you didn't pay for. So yes, they rectified that very quickly. Anyways, I'm going to switch to my other OS and then we'll look at something a little more pleasing for those handheld games. And we're back, and now we're in something called Mu OS, which is a very light OS. It boots up a lot quicker than the Anbernic stuff. But yeah, as you can see, very, very minimalist, not a lot going on here. And this is how I want to show you some of these other systems that I actually use this thing for. I would highly suggest using Mu OS or any other OS besides the stock one. This thing is very customizable. Again, it just runs on Linux, so all you need is another SD card or use the one it comes with and just put your own thing on it with your own ROMs, etc. So let's just go into this. So these are basically just all the systems I'm actually interested in running on this, which is just handheld systems, quite obviously. In terms of how it emulates this stuff, it's all perfectly fine as far as I can tell. I've tried a multitude of games, some of the non-popular ones. I kind of really dislike reviews that just go around trying to emulate stuff that we all know is popular because it's like that was the focus for a lot of people making the emulators. But um, yeah, the compatibility on this is very good. So I tried very weird stuff. So let's actually start with the thing that it's built for, and then I will talk about the screen because there is a strange kind of caveat with this screen. So what was I playing? You know what? We're gonna do one of my favorite games as a kid. As you can see, I've got like box art loaded up too. It's a little messy, but I'll fix that some other time. But yes, Bionicle. I begged my mom for this game for so long. It's a decent game. But anyways, you can, as you can see, I've got sort of an overlay with the Game Boy Advance SP logo here, and you can customize this and make it look perfectly perfect. Now, if you've got a keen eye, and you've been playing Game Boy Advance for like a majority of your life, you'll notice that it might look a little off in terms of the resolution and size, and that's because this screen, while I don't remember the exact resolution, is not a perfect integer scale for the Game Boy Advance. In layman terms, that basically means when you blow it up, it can look a little funny. Things look a little stretched because it can't perfectly size by 3 times. It's like 2.7 times, so things have to be stretched just a little this way. It's literally like by a couple pixels, but again, if you've been playing Game Boy for most of your life, you may immediately notice it like I did. It doesn't bother me so much that I can't play this thing, but maybe that bothers you. I don't know. But yeah, this is Bionicle. It's a pretty good game. But as you can see, it's running just fine. Looks incredible on this screen. And yeah, not much to say other than that. Let's try another game. Let's do something so I can demonstrate the sound. Now, I think some people forget that the Game Boy Advance's sound was terrible because I think it didn't have a dedicated sound chip. It was all relegated to the CPU or something like that. So yeah, when you have that coming through a crappy Game Boy Advance speaker, it kind of sounds like okay, strangely enough, but when it's perfectly clear, the faults start to show. So let's go to Sonic Advance. Bling. Ah, man, I love that sound. Come on. Yes, yes. Yeah, we know who made it. It's a Sonic game. So, I'm not sure if you can hear that. It's pretty loud. It's a little farty, right? Yeah, that's just kind of how the Game Boy sounded, but it emulates the sound perfectly well. It can do it just fine. And yeah, this is looking very, very clear, very nice, and having it in this form factor, playing it like a Game Boy Advance SP, it kind of feels like a super modded SP with the screen replaced, honestly. But yeah, very, very good. And of course runs it at the correct speed and everything. I haven't really noticed, again, I've tested a fair number of games on this, some of the popular ones, some of the not so popular ones, and everything seems to be running just fine. You know, not too hard to emulate. It can emulate everything else here just fine. I will go into Game Boy Color just because I want to show you my favorite, and I'm not being ironic about this. This is my favorite Game Boy Color game. Look, I really like this show, okay? And sometimes when you just really like a show, you just like everything about it. Yep. If we work together, it's much better. Okay, I'm gonna embarrass myself if I sing that whole thing. Anyways, as you can see, the colors on this, again, are fantastic. It's nice and bright. Viewing angles are insanely good. And yeah, I'm sure you know there's not going to be any problem emulating a Game Boy, but again, this screen and these controls and this build quality is just perfect. Back to the screen size, by the way, it can blow up the Game Boy and Game Boy Color screens to a perfect 3 times, so this looks perfectly fine. There's no weird stretching or anything going on. This is a really good game, by the way. I'm going to stand this game for a second. It's kind of like Oddworld, where you learn gestures to sort of save and recruit other hamsters. They're called hams. Okay. Deal with me for a second. But yes, and you're solving puzzles using the gestures and stuff like that, and find items and collect stuff and buy stuff. It's a good game. Just trust me on this one, okay? Anyways, let's get out of that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Not much else to say other than I've really enjoyed this thing. It's pretty much gotten me exactly what I wanted for the longest time, which is just these handheld systems in a form factor I actually want. That's all I wanted. I just wanted a Game Boy Advance SP that could just play all my games. Originally, I was going to get an EverDrive and a modded SP, but that's pretty expensive, which brings me to the cost of this thing. Once I reset my brightness and stuff, there you go. This thing was like 85 bucks. $85 for this thing, and it feels far more expensive than that. Now, I know it's not FPGA gaming. If you want that, you'll have to go to analog. For now, I can't think of another FPGA handheld system out there that does Game Boy Advance and all that stuff. But frankly, I don't think you need to be worried about FPGA when it comes to Game Boy, Game Boy Advance. It's not that. I don't think it's that important. Our software emulation is so good on that front that I think you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. There may be an obscure game in there somewhere that isn't compatible. I'm sure there are like 800 games in there, but the fact that Bionicle and Hamtaro both work on this thing is as obscure as I'm gonna get, and that's all I really need. I was also testing some other stuff, like some of those Cartoon Network games, like Ed, Edd n Eddy, and then also like Samurai Jack and blah blah blah. So it's like stuff that, again, people don't test extensively. I know they're not probably going to be less complicated and stuff like Zelda and Mario and stuff, but the fact is it works. It works on this, and it works perfectly well. And it's in a nice case with good controls, high build quality, and a really, really good battery life. So I'm not sure what else you could ask for, except for a solid color and not the translucent kind. Why is this popular? Anyways, that's all I gotta say on this. I would recommend this thing. Anbernic makes a good product. They just make shitty UIs. It's as simple as that. So take that for what it is. So anyways, thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all next time. Please look forward to future videos of whatever I got going on the channel. Hopefully it will be far more lively this year. Thank you. Bye-bye.